And up front here, Jim Penny is here from the Initiative Fund, and I'll give him a few minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a packet of material that council members can look at their leisure. I think I have enough for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I will be brief. Again, Tim Penny, President of Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. I appreciate the opportunity to give an update on our work to this council every year at about this time. As you know, we are a regional economic and community development foundation. We've been around for 32 years. We have roughly $5 million worth of resources that we can expend across this 20-county region. Annually, we raise about 10% of our budget locally from counties, cities, corporations, banks, and individuals, and I do thank you for the ongoing support that you have budgeted from the city. We have two primary areas of work. One is early childhood, because the needs there are great, and the resources we can bring to the table are a helpful complement and supplement to addressing the child care needs in this region. And then we do some economic development work in support of entrepreneurial activity. In terms of early childhood, most recently in Winona and Winona County, we've had for many years now 2 full-time AmeriCorps workers that are placed in early childhood sites, in this case Head Start sites, to help with those kids that have the greatest challenges, to get them on track with their classmates when they enter kindergarten, because often if you aren't ready for kindergarten along with your classmates, you never catch up, and it becomes a huge workforce issue in years ahead. We've also done a couple grants to help with child care startups here in town, including a grant to A Chance to Grow and to Heather's Child Care. In addition, last year we did quality child care trainings here in town, and then every October we have a child care training conference attended by about 500 early child care providers from across our 20-county region. And with breakout sessions at that conference, it allows all of them to stay current on their continuing education credits. And then last but not least, we do thousands of book distributions every year for early reading programs in communities across the region. One of the recipients of that are every Kiwanis Club in the region that enters into a reading mentoring program with early childhood providers in their community. But other books have been made available in the last year to St. Charles Public Schools, St. Matthew Community Preschool, and Riverway Learning Center. In the entrepreneurial space, we have several new immigrant or minority entrepreneurs that have been in our Prosperity Initiative training program, which provides business training and mentoring to help those businesses succeed. We've also provided a grant in partnership with Winona Port Authority and others to help create the Garage co-working space. I just stopped by there last week when I was in town, and there were several people sitting there working, so I trust that means that that space is being valuable in incubating new business ideas here in town. Administrator Sarvey will recall that a year ago we were involved with Forecast Public Art to bring public art as economic development to several communities, and that resulted in a report that's now being used across the country as to the ideas that emanated here in these 5 communities in southern Minnesota. And we also do a limited amount of business lending. Our most recent loan here in town was to the Bluff Country Food Co-op to help them with their expansion. So that's kind of who we are and what we do: early childhood, entrepreneurship, and those are some of our more recent projects and activities here in your town. So with that, I thank you for the chance to give you this update.
Any questions for Jim? Guess not. Thank you for coming.
Right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And that's all I have. The city manager?
Nick Larson here?
Yes, in the back.
Nick, stand up. Nick received some training and has become a certified housing development finance professional. So he is certified in more ways than one, but that one in particular is going to be of great benefit to this community. So congratulations. It's not an easy test.
Okay. Roll call.
Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Councilman Thurley.
Here.
Moeller.
Here.
Alexander.
Here.
Iden. Here. Borzakowski.
Here.
Scholmeyer.
Here.
Under the required public hearings, the first item we have is item 2.1, the 317 Market Street rezoning from R2 and R3 to the MUN zoning.
Okay, I'll declare the public hearing open and ask Carlos to begin, or Luke? You get this one, huh?
You get me then tonight. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the proposed rezoning on the central school block from R3 in the northerly half and R2 in the southerly half to mixed-use neighborhood for the entirety of the block. You've seen this proposal in the past for the comprehensive plan amendment, which came forward and was approved by City Council on June 3rd of 2019. This is the second step in a four-step process in which the property would go from R2 and R3, as previously mentioned, to mixed-use neighborhood, followed by a final plat and vacation of an existing alley, and then any site plan or variances that may be needed for the proposed redevelopment of the central school property. As mentioned before, the current zoning is bisected. There are 5 properties to the north, which are zoned R3, and 5 lots to the south that are zoned R2. There's a platted alley running east-west through the middle of the property. The proposal would be to remove the R3 and R2 zoning and change it to mixed-use neighborhood for the duration, or for all 10 lots, which would then be replatted to accommodate the reuse of Central School as a proposed mixed-use building, or 4 full apartments up to 18 total units. And then look at the westernly portion of the lots as well, which could be platted into multiple lots or one large lot. The current proposal from the property owners is to simply reuse the existing central school building. There are the 5 existing R2 lots and 5 R3 lots superimposed on that image with the existing alley as well. In looking at the analysis, the staff and the Planning Commission looked at whether or not there were any errors or oversights in the approval of the original zoning of the site, whether there were any changes in the area's development patterns, the potential uses, and whether or not the mixed-use neighborhood would impose an undue hardship, and whether the public interest would be served if the rezoning was considered within another area, and whether it could be construed as spot zoning. We found that no error or oversight was made in the original R3 and R2 zoning. The adjacent land uses are reflective of the traditional development pattern of the city of Winona, as well as incorporating mixed-use neighborhood in support of the surrounding R2 and R3 zones. Potential uses for the mixed-use neighborhood would not impose an undue hardship, and in fact would support the existing and surrounding development pattern, and mixed-use neighborhood rezoning is the correct designation for the area in accordance with adjacent zoning in the comprehensive plan. Additionally, because the proposed rezoning is supported by the comprehensive plan, which the City Council approved on June 3rd of 2019, this would not be considered spot zoning. City Council has multiple options before them. They can approve the request as submitted, a motion to introduce the attached ordinance for adoption and adopt the findings in the staff report. You may deny the request, in which case City Council should move to table the item and request staff bring back a resolution of denial. You may modify the request, or you may table the item for further time to answer questions of staff or the applicant. I'm available for questions.
George?
Yes, as it sits now, there will be homes built on the entire block, along with the school being remodeled, and then the rest of the vacant lot will have homes on it, or could have homes on it.
The potential is there that homes could be put there,
Okay.
or other mixed-use buildings. Currently, the only proposal is to reuse the central school building for up to 18 residential units.
Okay.
The design guidelines do not apply if it's 4 units or less, is that correct?
4 units or less, it would not. But if it was a mixed-use building in the mixed-use neighborhood, they would apply.
Other questions? Luke? Guess not. Open it up to the public. Anybody here wish to speak to the issue? State your name and address.
Sean Byer, 2250 Garvin Heights Road.
Dan Nisbet, 57 Lorraine Court. We're the owners of Central Square property. We've been here before, but we just thought we'd come up. We can answer any questions that you might have for us. Open it up if you guys have any questions or.
George?
If approved, when will construction begin, or reconstruction begin? Or do you have half of it done already?
It's all done, George. if approved, I think we'd take a little bit of time. You know, we have kind of plans of what we want to do, but, you know, we'd probably take 30 days to sit down and make sure, you know, what route we'd want to take. You know, obviously it's the approval process that we had to wait for, whether it's residential or you'd look for some, you know, small commercial spaces that would fit into the neighborhood. But I would say probably within 60 days.
Eileen?
So in a perfect world, what would your vision for this whole block be?
In a perfect world?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Might have to stand away from it. Get slapped. You know, in a perfect world, right now, to be perfectly honest, we're concentrating on the central building. You know, we're open for proposals and you know, ideas on the other portion of the block. You know, we've looked at ideas of even possibly, you know, moving some historic homes into that area. You know, we're pretty much open. And, you know, to be completely honest with you, right now we're strictly concentrating on the central building. You know, we've met with the neighbors. We've you know, met with different people from the city. We're open to suggestions, and you know, I don't know, in a perfect world, I think I've met with you at the building there. I mean, we're open to what your suggestions are. In a perfect world, what would be the best thing to go in the vacant lot there? You know, we're in a position where we don't need to make a rash judgment. We want to do what's best, you know, not to give you garbled group, but what's best for the city. You know, we're going to plan on being in the city for a long time, and, you know, what's best for us, best for the city, and best for the neighborhood around there.
And whatever comes into that other part of the block, which we have, there's nothing at this point, but whatever it is, it needs to complement that central building, we feel. Because it's important, that is the block. I mean, it's an important building. And we appreciate the historic value of the building.
Paul?
So that actually gets to my question, because there are no design guidelines, correct?
Depending upon what is proposed, if it's a mixed-use building, there are. If it's anything over 4 units, there are.
If there's anything over 4 units, there are?
Correct. So a large apartment building would have design guidelines.
Okay. That pretty much answers, just because the historical nature of the building and the buildings that are nearby would encourage a type of construction if you did add buildings to the other side, to the west side of the block, that would complement them rather than detract from them. So that would be helpful.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Anybody else here wish to speak to this issue?
Dave Stoltman, 225 East Broadway. I first want to thank you for continuing to say the pledge before your meetings, and I hope you always do. I'm in favor of the building. It's going to add a lot of activity to our neighborhood. It's going to be maintained as a historic building. It's going to hopefully have some retail or shops or a coffee shop in it. And I think whatever happens to those side lots, like they say, they want to maintain the historic value of our neighborhood, and I believe they will. And so I'm definitely in favor of it.
Thank you.
I'm Doug Salzman. I live on Franklin Street, just a few blocks from the property, and I'm also in favor of it. I think the recommendation for mixed use in our neighborhood is entirely appropriate. I think that the developers want to do a good job of respecting the historic nature of the property. I think it'd be good for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm all in favor of the school to that school. There were 65 people in that school. So I know what goes in, what comes out. And I told the people, the owners, I says, no construction after 9 o'clock at night. I sleep at 7 o'clock. But I have full confidence in these people and they do the right thing. And I also want to mention, I had to recommend the council and the mayor for a job all done on an engineer building. There's going to be a beautiful site. The main square coming up downtown. That's going to be a great improvement to Winona. And redone on the bridge. I had some questions on that, but who would I see about that?
Question.
You can see me.
You?
Yes, sir.
Okay, was that inspected?
The bridge?
Yeah. Before you open it?
Every day, yes.
Okay, I was 3 or 4 steps to the bridge. On the right-hand side, is that pavement supposed to be smooth, flat?
I don't know, you,
That's,
why don't
that's
you?
probably more of a Keith question, but you can probably talk to us afterwards.
That would be flat.
We'll talk after the council meeting.
Yeah, the issue is a public hearing on a project.
Yeah. Just, could you state your name again?
Anderson?
Bob Anderson, okay, thank you. Your address? Your address, sir?
218, right across the street on Central.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Will Gibson. I'm at 223 East Broadway, just right in the middle of the block, next to Dave Stoltman. I'm totally in favor of this change from the R2 to R3 to mixed use. And I've been supportive of the earlier development ideas as well. When Mr. Schwab had it, I thought, we wanted some development in that block because it's just a sitting empty building. And it kind of is depressing at times, especially for older neighbors that have remembered it as a vibrant school. So in addition to that, I think that this zoning change is absolutely the right one, rather than it's just R3 or just R2, because it was built as a public building. I know the comprehensive plan stated it as a public space, and that had to get changed around to accommodate this development. But it was built with public money, so it was invested into by the Watkins and King families. It's a beautiful building that a lot of Winonans have a history with. That's where I played my first games of basketball as a kid in the park rec. And to have it as an only R3 or just a development building without the commercial space option would not allow it to continue to be a building that the public can come into and feel at home in. And so it's sitting there next to Watkins' home and on the edge of downtown, I think that would add a lot to the neighborhood. And again, echoing the comments of others, we have full faith in these developers to do the right thing. And so I ask you to support it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? One more time, anybody else wish to speak? Hearing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed.
I would make a motion to approve the request as submitted and to accept the attachments.
Second that.
I'm sorry, introduce, I meant that. I totally meant that.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Pam. Discussion? Al?
Point of procedure, does this require a majority of 5 on the council to make this happen? Or does it require a supermajority?
Simple majority.
Simple majority? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Let's we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 2.2 is a public hearing on the Madison School Comprehensive Plan Amendment request from a semi-public institutional educational to urban residential.
Okay, another public hearing. I'll declare this public hearing open. And Carlos, you get turn now.
evening, Council. Comprehensive Plan Amendment request. This is for the former Madison block. Talking about the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan deals with land use designations as opposed to zoning. So the request is to change from semi-public institutional education to urban residential for the overall Madison block, which is in the center of your screen in green. It's surrounded by traditional neighborhood designated property. That traditional neighborhood supports medium density residential housing, so single family dwellings, some duplexes, some triplexes. The request is to go to urban residential for the north 215 feet of the Madison block in order to support multifamily reuse of the existing building. Again, the current designation is semi-public institutional. This applies to hospitals, large religious institutions, schools. The proposed is urban residential, high density, facilitates multifamily housing in the existing building. With the current designation and the current zoning at this point in time, a maximum of 4 residential units can go in the existing building. So the designation needs to change in order for more residential units to go in the building. As proposed, the developer is seeking to change the designation of the north 215 feet to facilitate 21 apartment units in the existing structure and 42 parking spaces immediately to the south. The proposal is for the remainder of the lot to remain as is and also not have any changes to the comprehensive plan or zoning. For a comprehensive plan amendment, the criteria are a little bit different than for a zoning request. There's 3 criteria that we take a look at. First is the amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan. Second is the amendment being requested due to changes which have occurred since adoption of the 2007 comprehensive plan. And third, will the amendment have an undue or excessive impact on public health, safety, and welfare? For the first criteria, staff's report notes that land use, housing, and historic preservation sections of the comprehensive plan support redevelopment, rehabilitation, and historical and cultural resource protection of existing structures in the core area of Winona. Consistency with changes that have occurred since adoption of the comprehensive plan in 2007. Of course, the school has closed and now has been sold to a private party. That private party is the petitioner for this request. The third criteria has to do with an undue or an excessive impact on the public health, safety, and welfare. And this is where the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the request comes into play. The Planning Commission, when it reviewed the proposal, found that the amendment will have excessive impact on public welfare for 3 reasons. First, the benefits of redesignation flow only to the developer because it sets the stage for a higher density of rental units on the block than what is permitted on surrounding blocks due to city regulations on rental density, namely the 30% rule. Second, the potential uses supported by urban residential designation are incompatible with the existing medium density residential character of the area. And third, redesignation sets a stage for development that has not been shown to be financially feasible. I'll talk a little bit about those recommendations now. For the first finding, redesignation to urban residential sets the stage for the next step. Next step would be future rezoning to R3. According to the city's 30% rule, R3 zoning is exempt from the 30% rule, so all of the units in the existing building on this portion of the block could be rental units as part of the apartment building. This is different than surrounding blocks where the maximum number of rentals is capped at 30%. So the commission found that the proposal benefits only the developer and not the surrounding neighborhood, which does not support the public welfare. The second finding related to potential uses of a high-density development being incompatible with existing medium-density residential character of the area. Essentially, the overall activity associated with higher-density uses, the Planning Commission found isn't compatible with the surrounding residential area. And third, redesignation sets the stage for development that has not been shown to be financially feasible. That's based off of comments at the last Planning Commission meeting where they reviewed this item. So council options, the first is to deny the request. This is in keeping with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Under this option, a motion to adopt the findings of the Planning Commission and introduce the attached resolution of the denial would be in order. That resolution is in your packets. For this action, only a simple majority is required. You could also take a look at approving the request. Under this option, council would need to state on record findings supporting the approval of the request, and a motion should be made to direct staff to bring proposed findings approving the amendment to the next meeting. So what we do is we put together a resolution approving the amendment to come before council for a decision at the next meeting. In this case, a supermajority of 5 votes is required for this option. You could also table the item if needed. I'm available for questions.
Questions for Carlos? George?
Yeah, just recap here. As of right now, the developer can put 4 apartments in there without doing any other changing?
Correct.
Okay, you put 4 in.
Correct.
And in order to change, in order to put more, then this has to be, the comp plan has to be changed.
The first step is a changing comp plan.
Comp plan. So we're not approving no zoning tonight, we're not, so just approving the comp plan change. And then the zoning, that would go then back to the planning commission. They could decide if they want to go low density, high density, medium density, whatever.
Correct. It would go back to the planning commission for a recommendation to council.
Okay.
Carlos, should the comp plan be changed, what impact does that have on the next step of zoning change request?
So the
Are
comp
they
plan,
completely separate, or does it impact, make it easier, I guess maybe I'm asking?
the comp plan does set the stage, makes it easier for the argument to rezone the property from R2 to R3.
In what way? I mean, why is it easier?
One of the primary criteria that we take a look at for rezoning has to do with future plans for the area and if there's an instance of spot zoning. To overcome those questions and to support the rezone, you take a look at the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan supports the type of development that's being proposed for the specific zone, then that's an indication that the rezoning is appropriate. So the comprehensive plan serves as the reference for zoning changes.
Michelle?
So ultimately, what we're looking at is a property that's zoned for use that no longer occurs. So we're looking at rezoning, changing the comp plan so that it can be used.
Yes, it opens up the door to additional uses. One important thing is that if it is redesignated and eventually rezoned, that does not prohibit a school use from going back into the building.
But right now, because of how it's on the comp plan, it's basically a public, and it's meant to be a public entity building, hospital, church, school.
Yes.
And that, okay, that's what I need to know, thanks.
Eileen?
And currently is the other half of that block, that's R2. So what are the limits on what could be put there as it is currently?
So as it is currently, under the R2 designation, what you could do is you could put single-family homes here. You could do duplexes. And the remainder of what you could do with it depends on if there were a green space to be maintained where the current playground is. If that green space is maintained, then what you would have the option of doing is putting a maximum of 3 fourplexes on the south portion of the lot. One important wrinkle is that the 30% rule would apply and does apply in this area. So a maximum of 2 of these parcels could be rental. So what that may end up influencing is development of, at max, a couple of quads under numbers 2 and 3, and then potentially a single-family owner-occupied home under number 4, because the 30% rule would apply.
Go ahead.
And then if the comp plan were changed for that 215 feet deep of the block, then if the developer were to come back and ask to then change the comp plan for the other part of the block, does that then mean that now there's a stronger case for that because it's next to another piece of high urban residential?
Certainly helps.
Paul?
So let's suppose, could the building be developed for owner occupants rather than rental occupants?
Could be, yes.
As well as the south half of the block,
Could be, yes.
without changing any of the comp plan or zoning.
No, for the existing building, in order to put more than 4 units in it, regardless if it's owner-occupied or non-owner occupied, you need to change the comprehensive plan first and then the rezoning.
So then the 30% rule wouldn't apply if they're owner occupied, would they?
It would not apply because of the R3 zoning. So if you wanted to have a number of the units to be owner-occupied, there's nothing that would prohibit you from doing that.
Any other questions for Carlos? I guess not. Thank you. Open it up to the public. Anybody wish to address this issue? If so, state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Andrew Brunner. I live in the city's 4013 31st Street West in St. Louis Park. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. After years of individual Winonans, various groups, committees, city departments, investors studying the Madison blocks for years, there have not been any feasible plans anyone has come up with, besides rezoning to R3 multiple family. Currently, with the existing zoning, there would only be allowed to be 4 units in this huge building, completely unrealistic. The zoning is incorrect for the building that already existed before the numerous changes were made, rule changes were made, and the historic designation. The building must be dealt with one way or another and to be used, and this proposal will be a great benefit for the neighborhood and Winona as a whole. This building and block have likely been one of the most vetted in the city. This has gone on for years. It's been in the paper. It's taken a lot of effort. Still, no one has come up with a plan for us to use this building for anything else besides multifamily. I have heard multiple times that there's an offer coming. We should do this, we should do that. I spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars tracking down every single lead. Per the city and Engage, the building costs $10,000 a month to maintain. I'm paying for that right now out of my pocket. That keeps accruing no matter what happens as the years, as the months goes on. At some point, it's going to become very difficult. I have spent many months doing this. Time is working against us. The historic tax credits on May 28, 2019, a month ago, were just reduced. So now this building costs me more. Before, I would complete a building and I get a check for my tax credits. A check, it's not money, it's tax credits, but I could sell those. Now I have to wait 5 years to get it. It's devalued immensely. My banker says at least 35% and it could be 50% less. This just got extremely more expensive, all this venting that we have been doing. On top of that, in 2 years, that historic tax credit sunsets, and nobody's going to touch this building then. This may be the last opportunity to save this building. Also, we are in the 8th inning of this building boom. I believe the second half of the 8th inning. This is one of the longest building booms in history with low interest rates, money's flowing, everybody's making money. Good times aren't going to last. The rezoning is necessary because of the 2007 comp plan changes and other changes. During that time, allowed other buildings in that neighborhood to be much more dense than I'm proposing. But rules have been changed after this building was built, and multiple zoning changes occurred afterwards. This building itself cannot adapt to rules as it cannot be modified greatly. It's a historic property. Winona City Council designated this building historic property. This was another change that limited the building's use and modifications that can be made to it. It serves a noble purpose, and I'm glad Winona is restoring their buildings. But it infringed on the zoning, the comp plan, and it conflicts directly with a building that's consistently or completely already built. This building would have to be torn down. This building, if torn down, would have been worth a lot more money than it is today. The county assessor lists the building worth $5,000. I think he's being incredibly generous. I'm proposing R3, which is designated multifamily on the city's current webpage. Not high density. I'm not proposing high density. And nobody should say I'm proposing high density. My proposal is for low density by anybody's definition. R3 can have triple the amount of units, I believe, or triple amount of people per square foot that I'm requesting. So I'm not even maxing out that. I'm at the low end, and it's not high density. R3 on this building is not high density. It's not to the high limits or the medium limits in R3. This rezoning works. And not only that, it's the only thing that works. I tried daycare. I spent thousands of dollars on that. And I can go into any detail why this building doesn't work. One glaring one is with the school district with tens of $millions worth of advertising. If they couldn't fill that building up with kids, what makes you think I could fill that up with kids? I met with 3 daycares. I followed everyone's lead they gave me, and they all were complete dead ends and waste of money. But I still did them. I did my part. It was very costly. I went to the first planning commission meeting saying this is the only thing that works. Only thing that works. I went to the last planning commission. This is the only thing that works. The Winona Shopper was there in their paper on 6/12/19, repeated what I said, and also repeated what Laverne Olson said. This works. He heard it. He was listening. And I say again, this works. This is the only thing that works. A lot has changed since I first bid on the school over a year ago. St. Matthew's broke ground maybe 5 weeks ago. Some relief is on the way for childcare. Main Street broke ground. Relief is on the way for childcare. A large 55-plus apartment building near Target. Relief is on the way for 55-plus. Winona State University again came out with a huge drop in enrollment. It's at least 4 years in a row from me reading the papers, I believe. There's relief on the way for overcrowding and students looking for housing. This is not going to be a place that they're going to live. They're not going to be able to afford it. They're not going to want to live here because it's mainly single bedroom. I went way, way above the call of the duty, working with everybody. I followed the spirit of the rules, and I engaged everyone. The plans of this building have only changed to appease the neighbors in Winona. My back is now broken. It's actually broken. I cannot do anything else. Nobody else can do anything else. My plan is a 21-unit apartment building. Leave the playground is for now, just like Central's. And that sailed through the zoning commission, by the way. And that also went up 2 steps. And I'm only asking 1 step. R1, R2, R3. I'm just asking R2 to R3. That went to the next step. Neighborhood business, I believe it is. In figuring out the plans that work, it is important to remember this. The next highest bid for Madison was $25,000. Central sold for $250,000. That means anyone else's plan shows Central School is worth 10 times as much as Madison, or Old Man Madison. The county estimated, like I said, $5,000 is all the building is worth. The lovely Ladies Central is a 9 out of 10 condition, whereas Madison is a decrepit 4 out of 10 condition. One of the biggest blighted buildings in the city. This is imperative to realize. and has been backed up by the Wold report, which says there's over $6 million of repairs. It might have been 7.5 that's needed in that building. When the building's done, it's going to be worth less than $2 million. Who on the earth would take this on? I have reasons, and I'll explain those later. And I don't think anybody else would. I found no one else willing to pay the rent at Madison to cover the cost of the repairs. I took people through, they lowballed me. I said that doesn't even, some of them didn't even pay the utility bill, the $10,000 a month divided by 21 units. But at this point, we all have to deal with it. The zoning commission who I talked to tried to pass it off, saying this was done before, this is not our problem. That is not the way elected officials should operate. The building required decades of maintenance in excess of huge reuse cost and much time. I believe Winona is lucky somebody is willing to take this project on. I'm a seasoned professional doing this. It's not a good investment. I didn't come to Winona for a good investment, and I'll address why I came here. But I'm willing to do it. And another important thing is each single day I own that property, it goes up in value. I just wrote another $2,000 check for mechanical design work. I hired people to clean inside the building. It needs like $30,000 worth of cleaning. There are high risks in this building. The building is improving every day and every day from now on as long as I own it. There is no risk to anybody besides me. Rezoning is the only option. Previous zoning changes have unfairly infected this property. Rezoning would stabilize a historic property. It would also follow precedent. Central School, which is on the same street, Wabasha, same size building, or same size lot, they got rezoned, so spot zoning is not a question. We are lacking this type of apartment. It would reduce crime and police calls to this area. Constantly I have police coming out there. There have been numerous crimes and police calls to this building. I will now talk about the biggest arguments people had against rezoning. Carlos, do you have the PowerPoint? Excellent.
Why are we talking about rezoning? What's the issue at hand? It's a comp plan change. So why do we keep talking about rezoning?
I can explain. Through all the meetings I had with the first meeting, the commissioners always said rezoning.
I understand what they talked about.
Okay.
We're talking about what the council has to deal with.
Okay.
The issue before them is the comp plan amendment, not the rezoning.
I will change my verbiage to not use rezoning and why we should change the comp plan then. I got in a unique situation with them. The zoning commission wasn't listening to me. It was a difficult time there. They all had their own agendas, so I had to change it. What I'm proposing is 21 bedrooms, 23 bedrooms, 21 units, market rate building, and the target market's going to be teachers, nurses, business professionals, and retirees. The biggest argument they have, and everybody has about, is density. There's two ways to define density. The first one is human density specific. The number of people who live on a block of the same size. It's a way you can compare block to block anywhere. The other way is structural density specific. The coverage area of buildings on a block of the same size. This is how much the building covers the land, how much the garage covers the land. The neighborhood around Madison, I'm completely hearing as low density. That's what I'm hearing. Even though one single building is zoned for 20 people or more, 451 Wabasha. I'm asking for 21 units, and they're mostly single units. There's probably going to be 20 people in that whole building, and this is one small building. The block east of Madison has at least 70 bedrooms and or dwelling units and people living there. I have to explain this. I can't be exact because I can't go into every building and count the bedrooms What I had to use is the MLS. I had to call neighbors. I had to look at rental sites like Zillow and determine how many bedrooms that they had through that. And that's why I don't have an exact number, but it is more. This is well over double the people that will likely live at Madison Place. And all the other surrounding blocks have more approved capacity than the Madison block. Single houses can even have more. Because typically, if you're in a family of 2, 6, 4, 6, 8 people, you'd probably live in a house. So those houses are more dense than single units. This argument about density of humans is squashed. One single house on 527 Sanborn had 9 people living there at one time. The one small house has almost 50% of the density that I am requesting. This is the house that has, and I wrote something on the bottom that's incorrect, but it's zoned for 20 people. One small lot. These are my sources. Zillow, city rental housing licenses, the MLS, and neighbors telling me. So I had to rely on other people to get the information. This is the area we're talking about. This is the Madison building. This is the open space around it. This little building, 20 people can live there, and I want to put 21 people in this whole area here. There are multiple families on this building, on that lot. In 1 second here, let me get the numbers on here. There are, on this block number 2, there are, let me see where I wrote that. There are 8 houses with an average of 3 bedrooms. That's 24 people. So just the houses are more. There's one business also on the corner. Then there's rental units with a total of 63 approved units on there. This building, or not 63, where am I in here? Let's see, 63. Yeah, 63. I wouldn't even be allowed that. That would be the most I would allow to have people in here, period. So what should we call this lot? Madison block. If the density of all the blocks surrounding it have more density in structure and people living there. Very low density is what we call it. And to go back to look about structural density, look at all this open space. Look at all this crowdedness around here. And if you divide it out, Madison School Building takes up 20.8% of the lot. This house, the second one in, takes 57% of the lot. So even if I would double Madison, I would still be less structurally dense than the neighborhood. So human density and structural density is much less. So to summarize this, density for this proposal is lowest in the area. Historic preservation will occur. I will restore this building and stabilize it. There's precedent. Central School went up two higher classes. I'm only going to go up 1. Multiple zoning changes through time make us need to change this comp plan. Winona needs more housing choices. And the charter calls for it to be good for Winona. Not just 1 or 2 neighbors, good for Winona. And I will also lower crime. We've had many issues on that building, and I will continue to speak on those issues as we go. My proposal is what the community is demanding, more housing and better rental options. So what would you expect from a Madison unit if you went over to the building? How does it compare to others? What could you expect if you voted yes tonight? I think the way to do it is to use comparisons. Everybody knows the main square building downtown, and some of this is subjective, but I think I'm being as fair as I can. It's got nice stonework going up, nice new windows. The developer has plenty of money to do nice things there. It's in a great section of town. Maybe we call that a 10. There's a 2-year-old building near the interstate called Island City. It's a nice newer building, great location also. Maybe we call that a 9 or an 8 for sure. The Madison building is in a less demanded neighborhood. The neighborhood needs some help. It needs some revitalization. It's probably a 5 neighborhood. But I still plan to overbuild and make it a 7 or a 7.5. The neighborhood itself will detract from the value, but I'm still willing to do it. The quality of the interior of Madison will be unique and charming. We're going to be one rare building with 12-foot ceilings, in-unit laundry, larger windows than even Main Square, old world charm. There's going to be a lot of brass doorknobs, not a lot of brass. We will restore the brass. Brass poles, and there's other brass in that building. 90-year-old stunning maple floors. And we're going to keep this for a museum for Winona. Keep this for a museum for Winona. That means I'm going to go through the extra expense to keep the blackboards and repair them. Half of them in a unit. I'm going to keep those built-ins, repair those. I'm going to refinish the radiators. We're going to use dark walnut shaker-style cabinets with black countertops. I want to add the least amount of walls in there so you still make it feel like a classroom. Outside, I think we're going to have the largest playground area and green space compared to those other 2 buildings. This will be a place for teachers, nurses, and retired people. It won't be enticing to college kids. The prices are too high. I'm higher than the neighborhood for prices. There's a lot of places you can rent for $400 and even $300. My rents are going to average $775. The people living here you would like to meet and like to have as your neighbor. I'm a very experienced multifamily builder. I've designed buildings in cities with almost 50,000 people, and the city said it was the nicest building there. I take land, I design buildings myself, I build them, I'm there every day, I sell them, I rent them out, and I manage them. This is nothing for me, but I don't think many people would take this on. Why did I undertake this project? I bring friends to Winona and guests, and every road I come in, they say, this is kind of a blue-collar town? No, this is a great town. We have so much scenery. And they said, well, coming in 61, you have those homes on this. Well, that's just one building. Well, we go downtown, we see some new buildings that weren't built to my approval or aesthetics that I normally build. And I have to explain that out, so I can do better. My parents are getting older. They want me to come home more. I need something to do. Thirdly, I have been told by quite a few people, Winona is now making smart, progressive decisions to advance the town and better itself. Smart development is now viewed as a way to make the town better, sustainable, and enjoyable to retain people. Lastly, I had 1.5 years free in between projects, and I needed to fill the gap. Now the time's really shortening up. This project specifically will also reduce crime. Every month I call the cops on that place. I've arrested 7 people already. I let them go. I arrested them. I confiscated them in the playground. I called the police. I said I won't press charges if they never do it again. Every 3 weeks somebody takes a bottle, throws it up in the air, smashes in the parking lot. There's been attempted break-ins, at least one with a tool of the pry open. There's illicit drug use on that property. Underage smoking, general vandalism, bricks thrown at that building. This will be greatly reduced when I just activate more cameras. And for sure it will when I have a continuous on-site manager. Crime will go down. You may ask yourself, what happens if I would vote no tonight? I think any logical, moral in the sense, I don't think it's moral to waste money, because you can do good with money, and I don't want to waste money, or a business person would not continue to spend $10,000 a month with no hope of any return. I think that everyone on this council would make the same decision. A no vote means nothing can happen in this completely vetted building, causing this building to be vacant for 2 years minimum. And at that time, the building boom's could likely be over, the historic credits are gone, it may sit vacant forever. And I'm not going to lose a penny. So the vultures that are circling, wanting to get this building for cheap, I'm not selling. I'm gonna wait the 7 years or whenever it is. Even at that time rental, let's see. This will become a vacant property very soon. That's what happens to the building. I don't think, Commissioner or Councilwoman Muller, would you write a check out $10,000 each month? I don't think anybody would. The playground area. I have to have sleepless nights, I have to pay for it, take care of it, and subsidize the city. Would a logical, moral person continue to keep the playground operating for free? And especially on a project that he's doing for the Winona more than he's doing it for himself. The tar area on the playground with the nice lots and what I've been doing for almost 16 years is ideal to be developed. I take the easy choice. I just develop it and let the building sit. I'm taking the hard choice now for the city and doing the hard, expensive building. The school will cost more money, it will be harder to run, and it will get less rents. If I build something new, it will cost less money, I will get more rents, and it will be easier to maintain. And lastly, with all this time in vetting, I now have a bona fide buyer for the playground area. I now have an owner. It's not my intention, it never was an intention of mine. I'm sure you're going to see it the right way. The decision for this property is in your hands. Please make a decision for Winona as a whole, and I'm sure you would. I can stay as long as you want for any questions, and I guess there is one last thing I want to say on the denial without getting too much of it in. If the 30% rule only applied, these are the 3 reasons why zoning commission defeated this. If the 30% rental rule was a reason on this building, why was it not central? If they said they didn't want high density, I'm not proposing high density. That's the second thing. And the last thing, the financial feasibility. I think if anybody, Eddie Hahn knows I can afford this project, and he completely took my words out of context, and I can explain in depth on that one. It was a lot easier before. This is much harder. This works. I already have approval from a bank. This works. That was malfeasance at best. So there are 3 reasons. Don't hold water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brenner. Madison School is my neighborhood. My kids both went there, and I think I would beg to differ with you that that's a 5 neighborhood. I think it's more like a 10 neighborhood.
I can explain. If you go through the MLS and look at prices, the prices on there are very average.
Well, I live there. I know my neighbors. I know the neighborhood better than you do. I think it's more than a 5. I know that.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. Brenner? I guess there aren't any. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? I'm sure somebody does. But who goes second here?
Hi, I'm Sarah Callahan, and I live at 556 West Sanborn. My husband and I live in that house at the corner of Sanborn and Dakota, and our kitchen window looks out over the Madison School playground. I have a couple questions actually for you, Mr. Espinoza. So, if this were to pass, and Mr. Brenner could put 21 units in, how many people would be allowed in those units? In other words, we're not talking 21 people, we're talking how many people?
A maximum of 3 unrelated could go in each unit. That's depending on the size of the bedroom and the design specifications.
Okay, so 3 unrelated people max in 21 units, right? Okay. And then we're also talking 2 parking places per unit, so that would be 40 parking places. I have to totally agree with the Planning Commission, their concern about neighborhood safety. Those numbers alone are frightening on that part of that property. Particularly if, in fact, that playground does remain, you would have children playing on one corner with 40 parking places and cars coming and going all the time. That's a real safety issue for me. I will also admit to you that I people have been to each and every meeting that has had to deal with this property and have asked the Planning Commission to not accept any developer's plans for that. I have to disagree with Mr. Brenner. I think we can do better than housing there. I think there's other opportunities there. And I just hope that you all see it that way too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Rosemary Broughton, and I live at 528 West Wabasha. I am for letting Mr. Brenner's plan move forward. I don't have anything at stake about how the building is used. I guess I'm more concerned about the building per se. But I've had to ask myself since the last Planning Commission meeting about the history of my own thinking and where my ideas come from. And years ago, we put Madison School on as an historic building. And at that time, part of the discussion was, well, what will we do with it if it's no longer a school? And the conversation moved toward one dimension of, well, it would become apartments. So in my own mind, that has just stuck there, and I took it for granted that this is what would happen. Another part of my own history, which is probably different than anyone else here, is I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. And I know the movement of slum development. You get the weeds, you get the litter, you get the broken windows, you get the boarded windows. You get young, innocent people gathering, and in fact, we've had cheerleader practice on the front steps within the past week. And in time, you start getting nefarious activity. Again, if we remember our history, decades ago, probably more than a decade ago, we needed to have a neighborhood watch. I did not know already that there have been problems that the police needed to be called to this area. So if in fact this proposal does not move forward and you vote against it, I would request both the neighbors and every city agency that's appropriate to exercise more than normal vigilance about this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Doug Salzman, excuse me, Doug Salzman, 510 Franklin again. Mr. Brenner, in great detail, told you about what he intends to do. I just want to remind you that the change you're being asked to make is irrelevant in terms of what he is planning to do. The comp plan change opens the door to all manner of other uses other zoning changes. And so the specific plan is not really what's before you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm Dave Burdick, 574 West 7th. I second Rosemary's comments. If that building is not developed and continues to deteriorate, we're going to see a lot more problems than what you approving this plan would be. So I encourage you to approve Mr. Brenner's plan.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Moppin. I live at 370 Olmsted Street. My house, my living room window faces the playground of the school. There has been a lot of crime going on there ever since the school got shut down. And maybe we could turn it into apartments and part of it for a new friendship center or something. Because there's a lot of people that need, I know there's the friendship center isn't in good shape right now, and I heard a lot of stuff about the friendship center not being in good condition. Maybe we could relocate the friendship center and put part of the friendship center in one part and put apartments in the other part, and have a nice little outdoor area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're
Getting closer.
Hi, I'm Beth Bro. I live at 514 West Wabasha. I would like to reiterate the spot changing of the comp plan leads to spot changings of the zoning plan. And the change in the zoning plan that's ultimately being requested is can have apartments at that place. And when I think of apartments, I think of Windhaven, and I don't want that across the street from me. I also would like to suggest that if the current owner of the property wants to reduce crime, perhaps the exterior of the building should be maintained, because it's not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Costello, 517 West 8th, so right across from the playground as well. The neighbors, I think, as all Mr. Brenner, and I appreciate his arguments, but for the neighborhood, obviously, I think your value goes down if you put in fourplexes right across from your house. And then the key to why probably everyone in that neighborhood moved there was the school and the playground. And obviously, I don't see how crime goes down. I mean, yesterday, because I had two kids who I don't know knocked on my door and said, hey, can we use your trampoline in the backyard? Because there's kids that need to go someplace. And the argument from the neighbors, I think the whole time has been that while that has always functioned as a school, it always functioned as a park, and there's a need for a green space, and pumping, 60 more people in that space is not going to alleviate that, I don't think. So that was, I think, our main consideration. I agree it needs to have usage, and as Mrs. Callahan said, I think we were hoping that it would find some use like that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick Price, 402 Latch. But I ride my bike through town and everything. I went to kindergarten there and all that. And, it's a big, beautiful building, and it just needs more life in it, I think. And, professional people would be good, I would think. Thank
Anybody else?
Albrecht, 26017 Old Pleasant Lane. I have absolutely no vested interest in this property, other than the fact that it is an historical landmark in the city of Winona. And from what I'm seeing here, I understand the concern of the people that live in the community and the fact that, you know, what they would like to see. But what I'm hearing here is you got two choices. Either there's a comp plan that saves this building, or the investor is gonna say, I'm pulling the plug on it, and who knows what happens to it. So you got a historic building, part of Winona, something that pretty consistently is brought up as a historic value of Winona. Are you gonna save it, or are you gonna let it fall into waste?
Okay, thank you. Don't be shy. Anybody else?
So when this building was sold, there
Your
was
name,
another-
please, and address.
Oh, my name's Alan Hillary at 258 Graham Street. When the building was sold, there was another party bidding for it. And they wanted to pay the school district $90,000 to sit on it for a year, so they finished their plan. And it was to make it for community use. That was and they were proposing to offer a much higher number than my bid of $26,000, $25,000. So I did bid higher, because I thought that was a good use for the building. And that group of people still has some interest in having the building be something besides an apartment building. We don't have any control over it because we don't own it or anything, but
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Lori Albrecht, 26017 Mount Pleasant Lane. The building is beautiful, and I believe that Mr. Brunner is going to enhance it even more beautiful, than, yeah, I don't know. But I think he's gonna really make it shine, and if, with apartments, we have Gunderson coming out, nurses, secretaries, whatever, and that's not too far away. Might be a nice quiet area for them to relocate, or, new nurses getting out of school, that are trying to start their career. It's a great location, and yeah, I definitely would not want it to go to waste.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Hannah DeGallier, 467 West Wabasha. My husband and I just moved in 3 houses down from Madison, and it has been an eyesore since we moved in. Currently, I think it takes away from the value of the neighborhood and the current state of it. I think it's very easy to say, take care of the lawn, or to judge Mr. Brenner for not putting all of his money into maintaining the exterior when he currently is putting a lot of money just maintaining while we're waiting to make a decision here. I know other people of my age are currently looking for places to live with a 1-bedroom or double occupancy and are struggling to find something that isn't college housing or isn't the brand new luxury apartments. So I definitely think that the need is there. I think it's also easy to say, come up with a better idea when it sounds like he has already come up with some other ideas and those have not gone through. So I do think that this would be great for the area. I think it'd be good for the neighborhood. And I think by having more people living there and taking care of the area, that there probably will be less crime going on as well. So I think that this is a great plan. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'll ask again. Anybody else? I'll ask one more time. Anybody else wish to speak? Hearing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed and move on to the council here.
I guess I would make a motion to approve the request and support the motion to postpone further consideration and direct staff to bring back proposed findings, as this is only for the comp plan change and has nothing to do with the zoning or intended use. I actually find that the urban residential fits in perfectly with that neighborhood. It is buffered up against a large number of apartment complexes and I actually live in the neighborhood, so I have a vested interest here. I'm going to just say that I live a block away. But just down the other side, I had to drive around and look, and the Heritage Apartments serve the same purpose in a very similar neighborhood, and it is not detracted at all from the quality of the neighborhood. It's actually added to. And I think if this building is left to deteriorate, it will drastically affect not only community, but that neighborhood where I live. And as I am in favor of historically preserving that building, I also think that fits in perfectly with what the council has asked to have happen there, is that building be maintained. And I leave it in the capable hands of the Planning Commission to work out zoning and building requirements. But for our purposes, it is not being used as a school, it is not being used as a hospital, it is not being used as a church, and therefore it does not fit under the current comp plan and needs to be changed. So that's my motion. Is that enough reasons? Okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
Well, they said you have to have findings, so I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Michelle and a second by Pam. Further discussion? George?
Yeah, just a couple of things looking at this. I know when I first got on council and the school system had this dilapidated middle school right next to our library. And then, you couldn't house kids in there, you couldn't teach kids, it's hazardous, all these things. And then after a couple of years, those became beautiful, viable apartments. There's all different types of walks of life living in there. And just one question that's come to mind as I followed some of this as we've gone on, this playground, I've seen it there. Who actually owns that playground? People thought the city of Winona did, but the school district did, correct?
They did.
They did. So now as a developer, whoever we may be, we buy it. What is our liability to keep this playground operating? I would find it would have to be, very, very high. I know, there's a lot of interest in keeping that playground going, but, who would maintain it and who would carry the liability insurance on that?
That would all have to be worked out through the development agreement if there is one.
Okay.
Eileen?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something, that there's been a lot there. I know folks are concerned about preserving that building historically, and I understand that, and I want to see it preserved, but I think it's really important to know that the city does not own that building, and the owner is responsible for maintaining it and making sure that it does not fall prey to demolition by neglect, which has been a problem. So when we're talking about saving it and doing a favor for the city, that's not really what is happening. That my feeling is that it's being held hostage until the developer is getting what he wants. And I'm not opposed to a development there, but I do think that it's really important that the approach to maintaining that building is thoughtful and not give me what I want or I'm going to let your building fall into disrepair, because the city does not own that building. It is the responsibility of the building owner to maintain it.
Okay. Other comments? Well, I'm a little mixed here. I guess all along I've thought if the school district closed that building, that it would most likely end up being apartments. And I'm not troubled by apartments going in this building. I think that there are no other alternatives. At least nobody's come forward with other alternatives for this. And 21 units isn't. He's not putting in 45 or 60 or whatever he could possibly cram in there. So it seems reasonable to me, and I think something does need to happen sooner than later, or it will deteriorate, and it will be a problem for the neighborhood. And I don't think any of the neighbors want this building to be abandoned and sit there and broken windows or attract crime. And so it is a comp plan change, and I think that it's pretty clear to me that it's not a school anymore, it's not public use, it's not educational, it's privately owned property now, and I think it warrants a comp plan change. And I think the developer spent a lot of time here tonight, way more than I wished he had, talking about zoning, but that's not where we're at. We're here to talk about the comp plan change, and I think it's pretty clear to me anyway that the comp plan needs to be changed at this point, because the use of the property and the ownership of that property has changed. And so I will support the motion for that reason. Paul?
Yeah, I'm sorry for following you, Mayor. A question for Carlos. So I just would like some clarification on the 30% rule and what that has to do with the comp plan change.
The argument related to that has to do with public welfare, essentially saying that the benefits are only to the developer, and those benefits for rental on the Madison block do not extend to the surrounding properties. So what it's saying is that the public interest is not being served. In the findings from the Planning Commission, only the developer's interests are being served.
So I've never, thank you, I've never really been a fan of the 30% rule. I think it kind of holds back some of the development that we could potentially have in our community, because we're strapped for space for development. I understand the neighbors' concerns. I think there is an opportunity for a development like this to benefit the neighbors and to benefit the neighborhood if done properly. I mean, unfortunately, this was thrown into our lap by the school district, and we have to deal with it. But I'd like to see that maybe there is a way to accommodate some of the concerns from the neighborhood through the zoning process. And so, again, I agree with Councilmember Alexander that this is comp plan change or adjustment in this area, and I think I'll be supporting it.
Eileen, and then Al.
I have given a lot of thought to this, and I think that there's a lot of strong feelings about the building and the block and the neighborhood, and I'm in favor of developing our city so that it's a good place for people to live and work and know their neighbors. And I would hope that if we pass the comp plan amendment tonight, that we are really diligent about the zoning and making sure that what could be proposed is fitting for the neighborhood. I would like to strongly recommend that next time Mr. Brenner comes up here, that he does not take a crap on volunteers who try to do their job in supporting the city, the members of the Planning Commission, to talk about the property and the block and the community like we can't do any better. That is not the way to win any favors, and I would really encourage you to have some really genuine conversations with the people in this community, because this isn't the way to do it.
Al?
I think, this is a first step in the process, and the zoning is going to be critical to the next step. And I will support the motion. And just for historic perspective, I went to elementary school in Madison. So I agree that it should be a preserved building, and this seems to be a good way to do that, at least at this stage.
All right. Anything, Pam?
Yes. The city does need more housing of this sort of single apartments that are suitable for people in their early careers. But we also need more open space in that area. We need to keep the park. We need to keep the playground. And I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to see the city and the developer negotiate this so that both are possible. It really does alarm me to see that, okay, the building would have 21 units, but then there's this whole extra part of the property that could be developed into these fourplexes that have a lot more. That's a different story. So although I'm in favor of the comprehensive plan change, I would like to see some movement on maintaining the qualities of the neighborhood that people have spoken for.
Anything else? I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on to the petitions, requests, and communications. Item 3.1 is the appointments to the Heritage Preservation Commission of Merle Hansen, Pete Shortridge, and Cynthia Jennings.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 3.2 is the on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Zaza's. They are changing from a corporation to a limited liability company.
I make a motion to approve that liquor license.
Second.
Motion by Michelle, seconded by George. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 3.3 is the Basilica of Stanislaus Kostka street closure request for Saturday, September 14th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by George, seconded by Michelle. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 3.4 is a request to close Hilbert Street for a neighborhood block party on Friday, July 19th.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion by Eileen and seconded by Michelle. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Under unfinished business, item 4.1 is the public safety no parking zone on 3rd Street from Harvester to Ewing and then Ewing to mid-block by Olmsted.
Move to approve or introduce the attached ordinance.
Second.
Motion by Al, seconded by Eileen. Discussion? George?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to support this resolution tonight. I agree with the no safety, no parking zone, but I think the $300 fine for parking in a no parking zone, I think is totally way too high. As I mentioned at the last meeting, that area where all those trucks are at, you cannot back in a 80-foot rig and not be blocking the street and traffic and other things that go on up there. I think what happens is I'm in door 1, George, you're loaded. Now Al's sitting down the street. So I come in, do my stuff. They call Al and tell Al now to come up. He'll be ready to load, take door 1. So I'm coming out and Al's already there. So I'm in Al's way and Al is in my way. And there's no place I can go. It's not wide enough for me to come out and make a turn. And I end up in the no parking zone where I have to get out, close my doors, do everything else. Al has to do that as well, too. He's going to end up in a no parking zone, open up his doors, come back. Now, that's short time. Now, if someone is perhaps parking there overnight, I arrive at Watkins at midnight and I'm going to get loaded at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm in a no parking zone. Yes, I can see a reminder, wake up, get a ticket. We issue someone a $300 ticket for no parking. This person is probably from New Jersey, Akron, Ohio, Dallas, Texas. He or she does not really know what's all going on, so you give me a ticket. I'm not gonna end up paying it anyway. I'm going back to Texas, wherever I go, and you're not gonna get the money. So like I say, I can see, I understand all this, but I think from there is no staging area there. They can stage behind the building, they stage down there, but that's where all the trouble comes in, and it's very, very hard to try to get rectify that situation, because the area is not made for that amount of truck traffic or the size of the trucks that come in there. So I'm just gonna, you can put the signs up, but I'm, for certain, I'm not gonna support the $300 fine, because they're not gonna pay it.
Okay, thank you. Al?
This is a way to get attention, and this is a way to solve some issues that haven't been resolved in the process that has been going on before with negotiation on the trucking company's part. So this is a way to get their attention. This is a protection that the neighborhood has asked for, and I think this is a good way to get people's attention. And if that doesn't work, then we'll look at other plans.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go and have somebody have an issue with safety in that area, and this is a safety issue.
I understand
I don't care
that.
about fines, I don't care about whether they're going to pay it or not, George, but this is a safety issue. There's been some instances in that area before that have caused some heartache for the residents, not the truckers that come in and out of town, but the residents of that area. So that's why I'm supporting it, that's why I support the motion to introduce the ordinance.
Okay.
Eileen, did you have something? No? Okay.
She's just cold.
Well, I'm going to support this. I certainly have run into enough people, and whether they're Quick Trip yelling at me or calling me on the phone about this issue and the trucks and the traffic through the neighborhood there, that, and it's obvious from the letter that we received from Lawrence Transportation that they've been trying very hard to get something solved over there, and it's not working. And I think a $300 fine is going to get their attention pretty quickly, and I hope it works, because it's kind of a mess over there. Whether it's 200 or 300, George, I don't know if it matters, but I think we're doing the right thing, and it's only going to work if the police get out there and actually ticket them. If they don't ticket these guys, what we're doing tonight isn't going to solve anything. So they've got to get out and get their attention.
So, like I say, I don't think it's gonna work because of the situation as to how these trucks come in. That's what they need to get the handle on.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, but I don't think, somebody pulling out and closing their doors and leaving is gonna be a ticketed problem. It's gonna be the people just sitting there waiting their turn or parking there for long periods of time. I don't know, anybody else? Paul?
So just the question, this is an ordinance change for the specific area. I'm assuming or guessing that in 2 or 3 years' time, when a new warehouse facility is built at Bay State, that will remedy the situation, and maybe this ordinance will be changed back again.
Maybe we put a sunset on it or something too, put 2 years on it.
It's already no parking.
Plans, though?
Well, I suppose it does.
It's already no parking.
parking,
The ticketing, I think, would be subject to revision if the problem resolves itself. I will say, though, it's not a matter of a couple of trucks meeting. They're parking down there and staying down there. And there is a remedy. There is a lot for them to stay in. They're just choosing not to use it, or Lawrence isn't communicating that to them. Typically the officer's going to bang on the door and tell them to move. If they don't move, they're going to get a ticket. So, and as far as collecting, we'll figure out a way to collect.
Yeah?
I just want to respond. I mean, it's a warehouse, and many things can be stored in an audible warehouse. So whether it's one customer or another, it's always going to be a problem if this continues. So I think we need to put this into effect and not sunset it just because of a certain client. So again, support my motion.
George?
I think the current user of there is probably moving in probably 35, 40, 50 loads a day, which normally you would not get out of you wouldn't get that out of Peerless Chain or or TRW or something like that, but this is just, you know, the make of it there, so.
Exactly.
Anything else? Guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
Under new business, item 5.1 is the transit grant application. This is for the operating of the transit program for the year 2020 and 2021.
Make a motion to that. I'll second.
Motion by Pam, seconded by Michelle. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 5.2 is the amended joint powers agreement for the High Speed Rail Commission.
Make a oh, I was gonna say, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Paul, seconded by Michelle. Discussion?
Yeah, I just would add and thank the council for their support ahead of time, of course. This is basically just language, this officially changed the name from the Minnesota High Speed Rail Commission to the Great River Rail Commission, and all those places in the documents where we have JPA with the Great River Rail Commission. It just aligns all that because of the name change.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Item 7.1 is council concerns.
Well, let's start with Michelle.
I'm good tonight.
Your concern list.
I am hungry. Is that a concern? I didn't eat dinner.
Now that I'm retired, I can eat before I come. Eileen?
You should all be concerned.
No.
All right.
She's hungry.
She's hungry and tired. Al?
I have nothing to say.
Okay. Pam?
I want everyone to know that Winona State's Education Village is near its completion, and that as of next week, we will have pedestrian-controlled crossing at Sanborn and Main Street. So that will really facilitate the traffic of students and people back and forth to Education Village.
And I think they're having their big opening on
September 5th.
September 5th at 10 a.m.
Yeah, right. And all the dignitaries will be there again. We're bringing them down many times this summer.
Good.
Let's keep it up.
Paul?
Wait a second. Also, I want to thank the street department for fixing that sidewalk on Washington Street that extends from the condos to 2nd Street. It was kind of a mess for people, especially in the winter. It was hard to shovel and hard to plow, and a lot of people with who need to be able to get up there on foot easily are happy, and so am I. Thank you.
All right. Paul?
I have three things. I have gotten a couple of notes and calls on, and Chad's not here, so Manager Sarvey, a tree over the trail in Sugarloaf. And the bottom of the steps at Garvin Heights, I understand that's Winona State's.
That's already been discussed with the president.
And then it seems to me that we have a new park, the bridge. Are we going to call it a park? And
Well,
if
we
it's a
haven't
park,
talked about that. I consider it kind of an extension of Levy Park.
okay. If it's not, then I think we ought to think of a name, because it's quite an attractive place, and I hope we can find a way to bring people down there, and a name might make that happen. So that's my 2 cents.
George?
As former Second Ward Councilman Dr. Call would say after we had a long meeting, have anything, Doc? I have heard enough. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Wow, George.
That's what he said.
Under the consent agenda, there are 2 items: the approval of the minutes from July 1st and 1 claim against the city by Maya Martin.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Al and seconded by Eileen. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Since he
That was
did dinner.
interesting.
Yeah, I'll
Just-
stay,
you have
yeah.
to sign up.
It's-
He already ate, so he's good.